Okay, so we're recording. Hi, so welcome, Mel. Mel runs Stork and I, and I'm speaking to her today because I wanted to offer some interviews for people to help people take control of their fertility journey and their life in whatever way that is appropriate to them. So I wanted to speak to the lovely Mel today about her journey to become a solo mum and how she now supports people who are going through that journey or making the decision to take that journey themselves. So, hello.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
It's okay. It's always lovely to see you. So, if you could just talk us through first about how and when you made the decision to start the process to become a solo mum.
Yeah. So basically, I would say my journey sort of started when I was 29. So I was in a long-term relationship at 29. I've been with my boyfriend for 7 years. And then unexpectedly, from my point of view, that ended. And so I found myself at 29. We were planning to get married at 30. And then I thought I would have children shortly after. And then it felt a little bit like the rug had been pulled out from underneath me, because I was like, oh, well, that was my plan, and so now that's not going to happen. What is going to happen? And I thought, well, not to worry. I'm 29. That still gives me time to meet somebody else and to continue with that same plan, but just maybe a few years later. And actually, that just didn't happen for me. So I dated, it wasn't really very successful. And as I approached 35, so sort of 6 years later, I was no closer to meeting anyone that I could settle down with. And I had a massive pressure over me of, I really want to have a baby. I'm single. I'm no closer to meeting anyone. What am I going to do? And my overriding fear was, I'm going to miss out on being a mother just because I can't meet the right person. And it didn't seem fair that those two things were sort of joined, because they're separate. So my desire to be a mum was no less than any of my friends. They just happened to be in partnerships where I wasn't.
Yeah, and down to look, that can purely be down to look. And like you say, it's hard when there is a limit biologically, and
Yeah.
just because you're not in a relationship at that point doesn't mean that you should have to miss out.
Exactly, and you definitely can't say it wasn't from effort, because I really put in effort on dating. But one of the things is that as you get older, the pressure gets more, and then you're not your best self on the date. So your overriding thought is, I'm getting old. You start almost wanting to meet a sperm donor than an actual partner, because you do feel the ticking of that biological clock. So when I was 35, I think over the years I'd sort of said, oh, if I don't meet anyone, I'll just do it with a sperm donor, kind of half in jest, thinking it'll never come to that because I'm definitely going to meet someone. When I was 35, I thought, I might actually have to seriously consider this as an option, because maybe I'm not going to meet anyone. And then at 36, I remember I made the call to the fertility clinic and said I want an appointment. And I thought, like, I'm going to do this. And I'd spoken to my mum about it and told her I was considering it. So it wasn't a complete shock. And then I told her I'm actually going for the consultation, and her reaction was actually, finally, you've been talking about this for so long.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then I went to the consultation at the clinic that I used. And actually what I tell everyone is it can move very quickly from there. So I went for a consultation, in my mind, almost just to learn a bit more about the process and what would happen. And they were like, okay, so you can start on your next cycle. And I was like, oh. So actually, I think I was 37 when I actually went in and had that consultation. And the next month I did go in and have the treatment. So it was that quick, really.
And do you think that was good in that you didn't have much time? You'd sort of been thinking about it for a while. Do you think actually having to make that decision of we're starting next cycle was good in helping you sort of move forward with that quicker?
I do. It was really good. I'd been thinking about it for years, and my thinking had got more and more serious, but it could have dragged on for I don't know how long. And yeah, the fact that they just sort of almost presumed that they were like, yeah, and so I just was like, oh, okay, and almost couldn't think of a reason why I wouldn't just do it. So it definitely did help me, and I think at the time, my daughter's now 2.5, so this was like 3.5, if not 4 years ago. And at that time, there really wasn't so much around about solo motherhood. So I didn't know anyone else who'd done it. I didn't have any role models, anyone to speak to about it. So I really did feel on my own. And I think now, what I hear a lot of my coaching clients say is, it's much easier to try to make that decision when you can talk to other people and hear other people's journeys. Whereas for me, I didn't have any of that. So yeah, that definitely helped me make the decision.
Yeah, because I guess even with when you're struggling to get pregnant, I found that there was nobody I knew that was struggling or that had been through IVF. And I guess if you don't know anybody who's been through it and gone through the process, nobody fully understands. And I'm sure everybody's very supportive friends wise, but you do almost feel as though, I guess, you may be having to explain, and if that support isn't there, how do you get somebody to really talk openly and honestly and help you make that decision?
It's so true, because I mean, my friends and family are super supportive, but my two best friends met their boyfriends at 17, and got married and are still with those same people that we went to college with, and so my reality is worlds away from what their experience is. So however much they are supportive, and they are, and I couldn't ask for any more, they can't understand the situation I'm in because they're in such a different circumstance. And even, other friends who try to put themselves in the same situation, and yeah, again, super supportive, and I couldn't ask for better support. But you can't beat somebody who really gets it because they've been in exactly the same circumstance. And now I'm part of such an amazing community, and when you talk to those people, you're always like, yes, that's exactly
Yeah.
it. They really do get it because they've been there and they're in that same situation.
Yeah, which must make the decision-making process so much easier. And I know we'll come on to it, so the support you give helps with that as well.
Yeah.
I know you said it moved very quickly with the clinic. How did you find the process of going through the treatment and donor selection, and then also the support available? I know there weren't many people you could speak to, as much support around. Did you have support throughout the process?
Yeah, so to be honest, for me, the really difficult period for me was making the decision. It was letting go of the fantasy that I'd created about how my life would be, more traditional route of meeting a guy, getting married, having a child conceived naturally. That's what I just presumed would happen. And I found it really difficult to let go of that idea. Because I didn't know anyone else who was in the situation, I just thought, why do I have to let go of it? Why am I the one who's having to do this? How come everyone else has managed it and I'm the only person in the world, is how it seemed, that isn't able to do this? So, different from medical infertility, but the result is the same. I couldn't have a baby, a different reason. And yeah, just felt a little bit like a failure of why can I not find a relationship to do this? So the big decision, and the big challenge for me was getting to that point of I'm going to do this. Once I'd made the decision and I'd run the clinic, actually I found the rest a lot more straightforward. So the clinic was super supportive. Obviously, they've done this so many times. They treated a lot of other single women, and they took me through it step by step. I've got a really close relationship with my mum, so my mum really supported me all the way through it. So I felt like I had someone there with me. And yeah, I mean, it's not an easy process, so you don't get me wrong, but it was manageable, and I'm quite independent. I'm used to doing things on my own. So the actual process itself, I didn't find too hard, to be honest. The support I got, again, fantastic support from my family, fantastic support from my friends, but nobody who really understood the situation I was in. So I didn't have, until I'd actually had my daughter, I didn't find a community of people at all until yeah, like I'd already had her.
Yeah, which is hard, isn't it? And there still needs to be more support, even for around infertility and those who are going through IVF. And I guess there is that support there. But did you feel slightly different to some of the people that were in those groups as well?
I felt really different because for me, it was almost a positive, because the reason I couldn't have a baby was because I didn't have a partner, and this was giving me a solution to that problem. And my frustrations were around other things, if that made sense. So I did feel like I was in a different situation. One of the interesting things was I would always go into the clinic, and there's often in a fertility clinic women sitting on their own. And I would always think, are they on their own, or is their partner just not here for this particular visit? Or one of the things I desperately wanted was to meet other people going through this journey at the same time that I could chat to. But the clinics aren't allowed to, give you that information. Obviously, they couldn't tell me which other women were being treated who were on their own. And that's honestly why I created the Stork and I, because I thought I can't be the only person who feels like they want to be connected to this community. So as soon as I'd had my baby, in fact at the end of my maternity leave, I was like, right, I am starting something to make sure that nobody else goes through this on their own, and everyone else is connected when they're going through this process.
Which is brilliant, because I guess there are a lot of forums for people who've had babies, and I guess there's a lot of support there for those who were solo mums as well afterwards, just generally in those forums. But as you said, the decision making beforehand was the part that you found the hardest, and that's where to be able to chat to other people and understand and validate those feelings is really important, isn't it? Which is why it's so important.
Yeah, and I think all the way through, to be honest, so thinking about it, going through treatment, although it was fine, I would have loved to have someone who was going through at the same time that I could talk to. And then afterwards, I feel like, and this is probably the same for anyone who's gone through IVF, but even more so for solo mums, it's so difficult to complain about anything, because you feel like, but I asked for this, I went through this long, difficult process to get here, how dare I now complain about anything? But it's hard. And people in partnerships find it hard. You absolutely find it hard when you're on your own, and the feeling of not being able to share that with anyone, because you don't want to feel like you're complaining when it's something you wanted so much, that's also really hard. And it's really great to have other people who totally get that and are in the same position, because we can all together be like, oh, it's so hard, and not feel guilty because we're all in the same situation.
Yeah, and not feel that people are judging you. And I completely agree. I think it's almost another level with going through, because I felt very much the same with going through IVF, that when it's hard afterwards, you can't complain, because you just feel so grateful that it's happened for you, and so lucky. And you've gone through this huge process to get there, that you can't complain. But when it is really hard, it almost adds a level of guilt and a feeling that you can't complain because you've asked for something. I guess it is another level for you, and you don't want people saying to you, well, you've asked for this, you brought it, not brought it on yourself, but it's nothing to do with that. You've made a decision that you would like a child. That doesn't stop it being hard for you. It doesn't stop it being a shock to the system, does it, for you?
And I do think some people do think you've brought it on yourself as well, because some people are like, well, you wanted to be a mum on your own, you chose this, so you can't complain. So I don't know if that's just something we make up ourselves, or whether there are some people who think that, but either way, it makes it hard at that time when you're a new mum, and all new mums need support, and I haven't met many new mums who are like, oh no, it was really easy. Most people are like, this is really hard, and you're tired. And when you're doing that on your own and you haven't got another person to give you a break or for that support, you need other people who get it, who you can have that conversation with, just to sort of reassure each other that that's normal and that's what we're all going through.
Yeah, support each other and validate each other, which is why what you do is so important. The purpose of doing these interviews is to help people take control of their fertility journey, and help them move forward if they're feeling stuck and not sure kind of what next steps to take. Having gone through it yourself and now supporting so many people who are going through it, what advice would you give to others who are thinking of becoming solo mums, and whether that's in terms of the research, accessing support during the making the decision, but also right through to, like you say, afterwards when it's been successful? What advice could you give on how they could take control of that and feel better going through it?
Yeah, so there's a few things I would advise. So in terms of making the decision, there's so much resources out there. So I think it's absolutely around connecting with other women who are in the same situation and other women who've already gone through the process. So I have a Facebook group called the Stork and I Mum Tribe, and we cover all those topics of, what's holding you back from making that decision. We do an exercise in the coaching I do called a fear inventory, which is around identifying what you're afraid of and how you can try to overcome those fears. So reaching out and connecting with others at the same stage and further ahead to learn from, I think, and I think Facebook groups are a great way of doing that, because if you don't want to be active on it, you can look at some of the older threads that people have already written about, and if you've got a specific question you want to know about, you can type and be more visible. So I would suggest that. I would suggest getting a fertility MOT. So some people, it's very common that I hear people say, I just want to give it another 6 months to see if I can meet somebody. And if from a biological point of view and a fertility point of view, there is a limit on those 6 months and how long you can give it. And so understanding your body and some of the results from the fertility tests may just help you with how quickly you need to move. Have you got more time? And as you know, there is no black and white on this, so there's no magic test that tells you this is how fertile you are, but it gives you an indication, and most importantly may tell you if there's something that needs looking at that you might need to address first. So
you wouldn't know any of that without that, and like you say, it's just being fully informed, I guess, because I think there is always that tendency of what if what if next month I meet somebody, or what if next month it works. And I think you could go on and on, couldn't you? And unfortunately that isn't always possible. And having all the information, or as much information as you can get from those tests, just to, if it comes back saying you've got a low egg reserve and actually you don't want to be giving it 6 months, it almost helps you make that decision.
Exactly. A lot of women I speak to say they made the final decision when they had the results, because their test came back and said you haven't really got much time, and it sort of spurred them on to say, okay, then let me do this. So they're probably two things I would do. I think the other thing is that you need to make a decision about what's the most important thing for you. So is the most important thing becoming a mum? And for some people it isn't. So for some people, they would only want to become a parent in a relationship, and that's completely understandable. And so therefore they may want to put all their energy into trying to meet someone, having to accept that may mean that they get to an age where they're too old to then have a child. But for many, they decide that having a baby is the most important thing, and you can meet somebody at any time in your life, and maybe that will happen later, but you can't have a baby at any time in your life. Unfortunately, there is a time limit to it. And so it's ultimately about thinking what's the most important. And for me, the fear of not becoming a mum was the most strongest factor that made me make the decision to go ahead with treatment on my own.
And like you said, you could meet somebody at any point, and if being a mum is the most important factor, then whoever you meet, you'd want it to be important to them that they accepted your child, and you wouldn't be with them in any other way. And it just maybe changes your criteria, but it's still possible to meet somebody. But yeah, unfortunately, there is a time limit.
Absolutely. And there's a myth out there that some people think, well, if you do this, you'll never meet someone who is going to want to date someone who's got a child. And it's a complete myth. There's so many people who are absolutely happy to date people with children. And actually, if you've got a child on your own, it's the best case scenario, because there's no other person who's involved. It's the easiest scenario to navigate your way around. And so in my experience, and speaking again to a lot of my coaching clients, people are generally, or the people you would want to date, as you say, are generally super impressed with the situation. They think it's a decision of empowerment and that you've taken control of what you want, and they're not put off by it at all. So the right person would not be put off by this at all. So definitely, I think it's a myth that you can't meet someone afterwards.
Yeah, I think society's changed so much now. I think families are so diverse that I don't think it is an issue. And like you said, it's about meeting that right person, and that right person will have the same values and be happy about the fact you've got a child. Is there anything else you can think of that is important for them to think about, or helpful for them to consider?
Yeah, so I think so that's how I would say, at the considering it stage. When you're going through treatment, what I would say is there's so many things that aren't just relevant for solo mums, but for anyone going through treatment, around how to keep control of this, not letting it take over your life. So there's lots of techniques. I mean, some of my coaching clients do the EFT tapping, do mindfulness meditation, all sorts of things. And one of the things that I also advise my coaching clients when they're going through treatment is around making a bit of a bucket list of the things that they want to do before they hopefully have a baby. So really getting some of those things that you won't be able to do if you're a mum on your own ticked off, and that gives you a bit of a focus, so that trying to conceive doesn't take over your life. And so I would say that's quite similar to anyone going through treatment. It's easy for it to take over your life, but there's lots of things people can do to try to keep in control. And so I definitely point people in the direction of whatever works for them, to try to keep focused on what you're doing and trying to keep living your life at the same time. And then once you've become a solo mum, I think it's absolutely about your support network. So having people around you who can help you, having people in your life who are there supporting you both emotionally and practically. And one of the things that I say is around not deselecting to spend time with people who are in a different circumstance to you. So some women don't want to hang out with the husbands of the NCT group, or they don't want to hang out with couples, or they don't want to hang out with families and in there. Whereas I say, get involved. If you know people who are living a brilliant family life, become part of it. Don't deselect yourself. And of course, everyone's different, and if it's a massive trigger for you to be with people with their partners, then you have to do what's right for you. But if you can reframe it and just think that you're joining in this, and you're having role models for your children or for your child, like male role models. And one of my friends was saying to me, they love that I like hanging out with them as a couple, because in the end they're still two individual people. They're not like, they haven't morphed into one person. So yeah, really trying to spend time with your closest people, no matter what their family circumstances are, and meeting other solo mums. So there's so many people now who have gone down this path. We have on my Facebook group local WhatsApp groups, so wherever you live, if you're a bit more remote it can be harder, but if you're in one of the big cities, getting onto a local WhatsApp group and meeting at this time remotely, hopefully sometimes face to face, and it's so uplifting and empowering and motivating when you meet with other people who are in exactly the same position as you. So definitely I would recommend that as well.
And I think support, whatever you're going through in life, I think it's always good to be around other people who are going through a similar thing, because you just know that you can talk honestly together and validate things. But yeah, I think that's a great point, that don't just limit your network to those people, because actually you could be excluding a lot of your friends within that as well.
Yeah.
Do you get people who, when they're making the decision, or having made the decision, speaking to you, or wondering about what you do around telling your child that they were, about the circumstances, really? Is that something that people are worried about, or do you find that actually it's not really anything I'm just thinking
Yeah, no, I do find that people are worried about that. So it's one of the things that stops some people from making a quicker decision, because they're worried, will it impact my child? I always point them in the direction of some research that's been done. So there's a researcher, Susan Gollenbach, who's written a book called Modern Families. She researches quite a lot on on modern families. Yeah. And one of the elements that she researched was solo mums, and she did a study about how often solo mums will be in the same category as single mums, but actually it's quite a different demographic with almost the opposite challenges. So it's not a competition. I would say it's not better or worse, it's just different challenges, because often as a single parent, you'll be some of the challenges will be about how you share childcare and how you work together to split stuff. And with a solo parent, it's that you haven't got that other person, and so it's around how you try to manage on your own and how you bring other people in your life to help you. So, but the result of the research was that she found that there was no impact on the child's development from being brought up in a solo parent family, which is reassuring to hear. And then I am a member of the Donor Conception Network, and continue to point people in the direction of the Donor Conception Network, who've done a lot of research about the best way to share your child's story with them, and then also with other people. So with my daughter, I started reading the books to her about her conception from very early, definitely before she could understand, and continue to do that. And there's age appropriate resources all the way through that you can explain to your child around their conception. And I think if you're positive about it and you support them, none of us know how our children are going to feel about being donor conceived, because every child's different. And I've seen some children are not bothered at all, some children are curious, some children are deeply want to understand as much as they can, and the research says be honest with them, be open with them, tell them as much as you can, support them, listen to them. And one of the big things is, don't just say, but you were so loved, you wouldn't be here without it. It kind of dismisses it. It's more around acknowledging their feelings and exploring it with them about it. So yeah, people are nervous about it, but for me it's just about communication. It's about working through that. And children change. At one point maybe then they don't care at all, at another point maybe this is something that's really on their mind, and it's supporting them through that entire journey.
And it's great that there's support resources around for that as well, that can help you. But I just wondered whether that's something that came up. And I know when we've spoken before, we've talked about like the difference between solo mum and single mum, and it's not always, even I know from speaking to you, you've found that people don't differentiate, even with clinics and things. It's not always differentiated, and there is a really big difference there, isn't there? And I think it's raising the awareness of that actually you're choosing to be a solo mum, and you want that differentiation, so that it's important to make that differentiation and be aware of that when people are are communicating with you as well.
And I think it is important to be aware of it, because the challenges will be completely different. And so if you're talking to people in the same, putting them in the same category, and they're both going through a difficult time, but actually for completely different reasons, it's not helpful to put them in the same category. So yeah, I think it's easier to be, I call solo parenting where there isn't a partner anywhere else around who is going to help. And people are solo parenting for different circumstances. Some people choose to do that, like myself, who's gone down a donor conception route. There are single parents who are parenting solo because for whatever reason there isn't another parent in the picture, and they would probably be facing the same challenges. So it's just, the difference is there another person that you're trying to parent with, or are you trying to parent and I don't want to say totally alone, because that's not fair, because I've got a massive support network, but without a partner or an ex-partner in the picture, I would say.
And I know that when we were talking, you were saying from your experience, that was what led you to set up Stork and I and do something to support. So you do amazing work now with people who are researching and making decisions to be a solo mum, and also throughout that process. So do you want to explain how you do support other people?
Yeah, so basically, I've got a Facebook group called the Stork and I Mum Tribe, and that's for anybody who is considering or already is a solo parent. And on that group, we talk about everything. So choosing a clinic, choosing a sperm donor, making the decision, anything that people might be on people's minds, they can go on there. And there's, there's more than 1,000 women on there now from all over the world. And I really like the global element. It's the same in every country, people are experiencing the same thing, and so it's really nice to have that global network of people. And of course there's different legislation in different countries, so there's a slightly different process, but people's feelings and how they're feeling about it are mainly the same. And so that's a free support for anybody who wants it. And then I am a qualified coach, and so before this I was coaching just general life coaching, predominantly for women who mainly were sort of like a bit lost in life and wanted to think what direction they wanted to move in. And I just decided to specialize that into women who wanted a child and were single and were trying to decide what to do about it. So I offer one-to-one and group coaching on making the decision to become a solo mum. And then I also have a group coaching course for pregnant solo mums. So what often happens, I find, is that everything is focused on that positive pregnancy test. So the entire process, you're gearing up for a positive pregnancy test. And then if you get a positive pregnancy test, you're almost like, oh my goodness, this is happening. And then some of the feelings you may have been experiencing previously can resurface. And actually, it's a really great opportunity to meet again, up to 10 other women in exactly the same situation who are going to be having a baby at around the same time as you. And we just talk through the nuances of doing it without a partner. And it's such a lovely, supportive group that meet when it's the pregnant solo mums. And then Choosing Solo is the group coaching course I run, where 10 women from around the world, often mainly from the UK, but we've had people from all over the world dialing in. One lady from Australia, it was like 5 a.m. her time, and she was like, I'm up and I'm dialing in. Yeah, we just go through the emotional aspects, the practical aspects, and then the process itself that people can go through to make this happen. And yeah, people are just, I find that people who attend the group coaching courses get so much from meeting other people in the same circumstances. They feel so reassured that their feelings and the things that they're experiencing are the same. And usually they go away having really embraced a decision rather than reluctantly made a decision, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, which is great. And they feel supported in doing that as well. And like we spoke about at the beginning, when there's very limited support around and you may not know others who've gone through the same thing and the same process, to just have somebody to talk it through with honestly and be able to express honestly about your fears and the things, you know, the concerns you have or how excited you feel about it, to have someone who fully gets that is really important. I think that goes across the board for everything. Having people who truly get it and understand is really important.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. And is there anything else that you think would be helpful for people to know if they're considering solo parenthood?
What I would say is, I think it's something that's on the rise. So more and more people are struggling to meet a partner in the most fertile years. So that they've got that time window of fertility, and so I think what I'm working really hard for is to try to stop people feeling like they failed if they haven't met somebody in that time, and really about rewriting that fairy tale. So we grew up with a very traditional fairy tale that you would live happily ever after if you met a guy, got married, had children. And that isn't necessarily the fairy tale that a lot of people are going to experience. And it's around really focusing on looking at what is a different alternative outcome, but it's equally as positive. And so, yeah, I would just encourage people to know that that is a fairy tale, and to rewrite their own fairy tale with a positive version that doesn't have to look like the version you thought it would be when you were growing up. And yeah, reach out to the Facebook community, the Instagram community. Like, there's so much social media, or just find one other person going through it that you can talk to. I think that really helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I loved what you said earlier about letting go of that fantasy, because, and I think again that applies to a lot of people who are struggling as well to get pregnant. You have this fantasy of how it will work out, and having to let go of that fantasy and knowing that actually you can have your own. It doesn't have to look that way, and just because it doesn't look a certain way doesn't mean it's not good, and it doesn't mean it's not right for you. It's just letting go of what you believed, and some of that is what society tells us we should have, letting go of that and rewriting your own. So I loved that comment. Thank you so much. I will share all the details of your group when I share the video as well, and thanks for the support that you're giving and for your time.
No worries. Thank you. Lovely to chat.
Thank you. You too, and I'll speak to you soon.